Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today for our December Indigenous Women's Health Talk with Dr. Alexa. This month's talk is on mindful holiday traditions, and we're so thankful and happy that you were able to join us today. In order to start us all off in a good way, I'd like to pass the microphone over to Candida, who's going to be doing our opening for us today. Thank you. Oh, can you turn that part? Yeah.
Hi. So before we start, in order to start things off in a good way, I'm going to start this talk by lighting a smudge. Medicine. Would you like this much? So we're asking Creator right now to send the sacred smoke your way wherever you are tuning in from. We are going into the little spirit moon, which is time of the storytelling. When we tell our creation stories, we understand who we are and how we came to be. So during this moon, we reflect on our healing so we can walk our journey in a good way. I'd like to take this moment to calm our hearts, quiet our minds, and open our ears to listen to the lessons, to build our bundles in a good way. To those who are listening with heavy hearts or clouded minds, I ask Creator to offer gentleness while you listen to these teachings. Miigwech.
Candida, thank you so much. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to those who are new to the Indigenous Women's Health Talk, and welcome back to all our friends who have joined us for over the many months that we've been together with Dr. Alexa and taking in and absorbing and learning all this knowledge that we're just really so blessed to have you share with us. I forgot to introduce myself earlier. My name is Carly Kostishin. I am the coordinator of the Indigenous Women's Health Program. We are all here together in Thunder Bay, and pardon me, just want to say thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I will pass over the microphone to Dr. Alexa now, and we can start. Is that okay, Billy?
So just a point of clarification. So for folks that have, people are feel free to ask any questions throughout the live stream, and those can be posted to Facebook, Twitch, and where else, Billy?
YouTube.
And YouTube. And so our moderators will be looking at that for any questions or comments, and those can be sent my way. And it's no problem. I usually at the halfway mark take a pause for breaks for questions, maybe even questions that aren't necessarily related to this talk. I know lots of people mention that. Sometimes it's actually hard to have a lot of this much airtime with a doc, especially in this time and age when there's just really not a lot of family doctors around. So just to keep that in mind, and at the end there will be a survey. Okay, so today's talk, Mindful Holiday Traditions. I'll just start by introducing myself for folks that don't know. So Bonjour, Mesabekwe Indishnakaz, Bijinwabek Sagi Nishnabek and Donji, Notmingwaning, Donji, Makwa Dodam, Nishnabekwe and Dao. So my name is Alexa. My spirit name is Mesabekwe, which translates to Sasquatch woman. I'm from Rocky Bay First Nation and a band member of Whitefish Bay First Nation. I'm from the Bear Clan. I'm an Anishinaabe and my pronouns are she, her. So I work primarily as a family doctor. So I'm in my third year of practice. It took 10 years to become a family doctor, which, I think is like a decade of my life doing that. So I always like to share pictures of who I am, and really why even listen to this talk? Why hear specifically what I have to say? And because there is really just a lot of mistrust, rightfully so, in our healthcare system, and so I do like to share personal things that are about my life so that you can feel connected and have rapport and feel like you can listen to the things I'm saying. So these are just pictures of representations of people in my life, things that I do, things that are important to me. So the top left-hand corner, that's myself and my co-resident. We graduated from the Indigenous Family Medicine program, which is located at UBC in Vancouver. So I did most of my residency training in like the downtown hospitals within Vancouver and the downtown east side. I have lots of addictions medicine. So I come from, and also got to work with lots of Native doctors, which was really impactful and really changed the trajectory of my training. In the middle, so that's me graduating traditional medicine camp. So I did that for 4 years. I started that in my 3rd year of med school. I came right off of a pediatric shift at the regional here, and my mentors at the time, Chuck and Shannon, said, okay, we're going to this medicine camp. So I just, got in my car and drove. And so every year we would learn about different medicines. We would fast, we would sweat, be in relation to those things. And just, it really taught me a lot. So I'm still really just like a baby when it comes to knowing about traditional medicines, but I just feel that it's so important for our healthcare providers to have that knowledge. In the right-hand corner, so that's my family, and we, my kuka and my papa, we build a sweat lodge every season change, spring and fall. So this is us getting eaten by mosquitoes, trying to build this, and so. Really grateful to have grown up with culture. I mostly grew up on reserve outside of the times that I needed to move away for school, either because our high school didn't offer the things I needed, or just there weren't necessarily all the grades that were there. So eventually I did have to move away. But other than that, lived on reserve. And then the 2 bottom pictures are really just me harvesting. Like that's me harvesting some bark. And then the other is mixing medicine. So traditional medicines are a pretty big part of my life. We do have specific talk series that are dedicated to that. I think most recently there was one with myself and Audrey, but again, I really don't speak with any authority about traditional medicines. Just know that it's something that's a part of me and a part of my life and part of my practice. So this talk was about mindful holiday traditions. I think, lots of Indigenous people and Indigenous ways of knowing is really modeling what's happening in the environment, and then that being the natural season progression for us as Anishinaabe people. So I think it's really important to contextualize the season that we're in and culturally what is occurring, because what's happening to our physical environment here on Namama Aki, Mother Earth, is also happening for us. So things are meant to be in rest. When the snow winter baboon comes and it blankets the ground, things as part of their natural cycle are supposed to be rested. They're supposed to become dormant. Animals, they hibernate. Plants become dormant. They get coated with snow. For some plants, they actually, in order to seed the next year, they need for the ground to get frozen. There's just lots of different things that the season teaches us, especially about rest. And so this slide, it says, in its period of darkness, the winter solstice, which is the darkest day of the year, is an opportunity to go inward with deep intention, to care for our spiritual selves, our bodies, our minds, our loved ones, and families, and to prepare for the longer days ahead. Because this is historically, ancestrally, a time where people, communities, they would be inside of their houses or their teepees or their huts, and they'd be storytelling because the nights were longer. And, once that first blanket of snow was on the ground, that's when you would know it was storytelling time. And spending time in silence and solitude, and darkness, because that's really what, some people, they start to become a little depressed, or they feel, especially as the days, you're like, what, it's dark and it's 3 p.m. But that is intentionally put on the earth for us, to remind us as Anishinaabe people that that is meant because it's time for rest. That means you need more rest. That means you need more silence in your life, because that's what I think of when I think of winter. And of course, with climate crisis that's happening and global, the temperature rising, things aren't really able to be in rest this year. The snow, it melts, it comes back, it rains. And so what's normally supposed to be cold, it's a bit warmer. So I always think about that too, because that impacts our mental health too, that we're supposed to be in full winter and it's not. And so to be really aware of the things that we're doing to our Mother Earth and to have good intentions of changing that. So holidays are also really a difficult time for a lot of different people, for a lot of different reasons. So I really encourage people to have extra care for themselves during the holidays, specifically for these things. If you don't have a family or a reliable support system, extra care for yourself if you have painful and or traumatic memories from the past, extra care for yourself if you've lost someone during the holidays and then maybe this is another holiday spent without them, extra care for yourself if you have family dynamics that are stressful for you, extra care for yourself if you have relatives that use the wrong pronouns, if you are a family that experiences food insecurity, which becomes even more stark, right, in a jolly time and not being able to afford food, right? So we want that extra care for yourself if you feel obliged to give gifts, and then this puts financial strain on you, and also special care for yourself if it's hard to keep your social battery charged because you feel like you have to attend a lot of events. So I think there's a lot of really unnecessary demand around the holidays for our time and energy, and so it can be a time for family and sharing. But in other ways, the holidays, aren't joyful. They're actually very upsetting. They're very sad. They're very triggering, and so that's why we created this talk specifically for this month, is for those folks where the holidays may be a little difficult. So what can we do to get through them? So in order to be able to talk about what's going on and how to make your holidays essentially a bit more survivable, we have to talk about your nervous system. And so the nervous system, contextually, it's like actually a bunch of different things, but summarized here on the slide, the nervous system is your body's command center. It sends electrical signals between the brain and the rest of your body, and it controls how the body responds to situations, how it regulates complex situations and processes, how it performs a bajillion different functions without conscious thought, right? So your nervous system is something that's always online, it's always responding, and it's really taking very complex situations and then telling you what to do. So the nervous system being all of those things, it's helpful to know, and that's why we're actually going to spend quite a bit of detail going into what your nervous system is, and because once you know that, you start to see that there are very specific ways that you can change how you feel about something to have less suffering, how you can develop habits and patterns that are better for yourself. Like, it's just really, your nervous system is so vital to you. Because nervous system dysregulation, so not being regulated, being dysregulated, can become an issue for a lot of different people. This has a lot of different words. I will explain this, but it's just to show that your nervous system is kind of broken down into two separate ways, which is helpful to know. So your brain and your spinal cord, the thing at the back of your back, that's your central nervous system. That's the thing that tells you to breathe. Those are the brain signals being like, oh, like the air is being like, it's quite, polluted, or there's not enough oxygen in the air. We need to start breathing faster. So that's the automatic process that's happening. It's happening through your central nervous system. Then there's your peripheral nervous system, which is essentially everything else. And then to break down that, there's your autonomic nervous system, which we're going to be talking about mostly because these are the areas in which you can change so that your overall nervous system up at the top here improves. So this is your autonomic nervous system, which is the thing that communicates with internal organs and glands. So like how your kidney talks to your heart, how your heart talks to your stomach, all of those things. There's your somatic nervous system, and that's essentially where you have different senses, whether that's sensory input, like I'm touching this water bottle, it's kind of cold, or motor output, which is, I want to reach for this bowl of sage, and so therefore I have an efferent nervous system that's telling me, hey, move this arm to grab this thing, right? And then further dividing the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So this is really just to show that there is a really complex interplay of what people have to go through on their day-to-day. Maybe this includes yourselves, of what happens when you have a dysregulated nervous system and how it affects things. But specifically paying attention to the sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is the sympathetic is the thing that tells you fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which tells you to rest and digest. So we can almost like biohack to get into those states even when we're not in those states. And same with this here, the sensory input and the motor input, we can actually make those inputs so that we then regulate our somatic nervous system, which then tells our peripheral nervous system, hey, calm down. So there are ways to hack this. And so something that we can't change though, is that our body has a built-in protection system. And those are really the deep parts of our brain that protect us from danger, right? So there's no way to biohack the fact that if my body perceives there to be danger, that my body will react as such, right? My pupils are going to dilate, my heart's going to start racing, I'm going to start sweating, right? Because my body's preparing me. Are we going to have to run away from the situation? Are we going to have to confront the situation? So your brain sends the alarm, regardless of how big or small the danger is. Which is really difficult when your old brain, so the really, really, really reptilian parts of us, like when we were cave people, right? Your brain thinks of a tiger as a danger. Maybe it thinks of as an oncoming car as danger, or maybe, having a little bit of like a spat with your coworker. And so your brain sends the exact same signal for all of these things. Which is wild, right? Because really what's of danger is probably the thing that's going to eat you, like the tiger, or the thing that's going to hit you, like the car. Is there truly a danger that's happening when, you disagree with someone? No, but your body is going to perceive it as such. And that's because that old part of your brain is not capable of discerning between an emotional threat versus a physical one. Because all your brain, it's, and it's in your best interest for your brain to operate this way, right? Like, to just be like, we're going to call it dangerous and then figure it out, because you need that lightning fast neuron pathway, meaning from one part of your brain to the other, to tell you immediately when you're in danger. That's why, when you are about to hit something in your car and you brake really quickly, like it is really helpful for our survival to have really quick to danger reflexes and instincts. The issue though is that it becomes frustrating when we live in a really fast-paced capitalistic world where everything stresses you out, right? And then of course, this is compounded by the fact that there is the ultimate danger to Indigenous people and to our health and to our well-being, which is colonization, which has been here since the year 1604 and continues to be an active way in which we're harmed, right? So there's the tiger, there's the car, but then there's also the danger of practices that are meant to assimilate or to destroy or to kill people, right? We can think of many historical and current practices that are meant to get rid of Indigenous people. And so unfortunately, we are at a disadvantage in the sense that we're always, impacted by this looming threat of our survival, truly, and for systems that don't want Native people here anymore. And we see that in health policy, we see that play out in so many different ways. It's built into our healthcare system, Western healthcare system where Indigenous people die and are killed by racism. If that was a cause of death that I could write on people's death certificate, almost every Native person's death certificate would say cause of death, colonization. So it's important to think about the stress and duress that we're under at baseline, not including that our brain is really, really good at picking up on the subtlest cues to tell us that we're in danger, and that it'll send the same blaring signal, like, you better run, right? And when I'm just, I'm telling Candida, hey, can we schedule this thing for another day? So that doesn't, whether I'm saying that, regardless if I'm saying that to someone, that how their body intakes that information is well, there could be a danger here, right? And so then your defenses come up. And that's a valuable process to us. We want that. And our heart and our brains are intertwined. And I don't mean that in a philosophical way, like, oh, like your heart and your brains, like they work together. Your heart tells your head what to do and your head helps guide your heart. Like there's that spiritual aspect of it. But no, literally in utero, there's a heart-brain connection. Because they're developed closely and from the same area in utero, like as you're developing. The heart descending later on in fetal development, but maintaining a close relationship with the brain. And so people are like, well, why? Like there's that philosophical understanding of your heart and your brain being connected, but anatomically where they came from, that's true in terms of fetal development. And this is why our thoughts affect our emotions and our emotions affect our thoughts. Like they're so intimately linked. And when we know that, that means we can actually work to either try and change our thoughts or change our feelings about something. Because if we change our feelings about something, our thoughts will change. If we change our thoughts about something, our feelings change, right? So there's multiple different, which is advantageous for us as humans, because then that means there's a lot of different coping skills we can have to really try and cope with a lot of different difficult things. And I think about often if our bodies and hearts are intertwined, how does that apply, to generations of trauma that people have experienced? So lots of people know, like a really famous book, The Body Keeps Score. But that's also not a philosophical thought. Your body actually does. Because it's always trying to make and recognize patterns. So even if there's not a pattern that exists, your brain, it's one of its main functions as an organ within your body is to make and recognize patterns. So if every time I touch a hot stove and my brain is like, hey, that's hot, we're burning, I say, oh, okay. And then your body's going to be like, so every time you touch a stove, that's really hot, right? Like it's trying to make, because that's more efficient. It takes a lot of energy to distinguish something versus just your brain having this really quick pathway of so something to consider then is that your brain tries to connect things that maybe aren't interrelated. So for example, I experienced a lot of sexual violence from men. And so my brain, and this was my experience multiple times. And so my brain was like, hey, men equals danger. Because they wanted to make a pattern, right? It's not efficient to be like, well, but I have a grandpa who's a really beautiful man, and I have brothers that are, there's that. That's the new parts of your brain, the frontal lobe that makes those distinguishments for you. But the really, really old part of you is the old part of your brain is saying, no, that men is just that means danger, right? And so, but those things aren't inherently linked. I've made that link and my brain has made that link because it's designed to do such a thing. It's designed to make those links. And so what I mean to say then is that you can't really generalize anything, right? Christmases are always bad. The world is always awful, because our brain wants to do that, but we really have to fight those patterns of thinking because it can be dangerous. But if your body keeps score, literally it's tracking what's happening. My body is tracking me right now. As I'm really intellectually talking about this PowerPoint, my body is keeping track of the temperature. It's keeping track of hey, you're doing a presentation, your heart rate's a little bit higher, you're sweating a little bit. Even though I myself don't feel nervous, my body is keeping score. It's keeping track. Hey, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're thinking? And so treating trauma then isn't really just in your head or in your memories. It's actually because trauma gets stored as habitual reflexes that are the state of your nervous system, which is why, being quick to anger, quick to shutting down, maybe you're really quick to getting defensive or sad when you perceive someone to be talking down to you. Your body is responding to your physical environment, whether you're aware of it or not. And so it does keep score. And how it does that, especially when people have experienced a lot of trauma within their lives, is this sort of trapped energy of your body constantly thinking that it's under attack or under in danger. And so then people start to develop these really vague presentations, right? Where they always have headaches, they have flashbacks, they're super tired, they have body pain, their immune system's weak, they crave different foods, their body size maybe increases, you have digestive issues, chronic pain, you disassociate, right? Like these are your body's responses to emotions, to situations, and it's doing it within your best interest. But it does keep score. And so that's why I do think a lot of people, especially when they're not addressing the trauma or whatever is in their life that's really frustrating them, and it just lives there, right? Like spiritually, energetically, but also physically, like, because your body's like, ooh, we better always be scared every time we do something because we don't know if it's going to be different. And also considering that, every person with a womb is born with all of the eggs that they're ever going to have in their lifetime. So that means your grandma had you within their womb the same before your great-grandma, your great-great-grandma. So you existed in someone's ovary many generations ago. And all of the future generations that you could possibly have for the future, if you were to have children, they already exist inside of you. You've already been born with all of them. And so that's really something to consider too, about people over time start to develop, especially neuroendocrine issues due to trauma. So if I think of my great-grandmother who maybe experienced residential school, had her rights taken away, all of these things, she's going to naturally have a really fast acting and quick acting adrenal system. She's going to have really quick adrenal glands, right? And so as a result, my grandma has a quick adrenal gland, and so do I, and so does my mom. And as a result of that, what does that mean? Well, it's quick to release cortisol, which is your stress hormone. Like, I have an overactive adrenal gland that's always releasing cortisol. And where did that come from? Well, I existed within my great-grandma, great-great-great-grandma, and we think back to that slide where colonization started in 1604. So it's not to make people feel sad or to think oh my gosh, how are we ever going to change this? Literally our epigenetics is changing as a result of the trauma that we experience. But it's just to be aware and informed, and also not to blame yourself, because there are things that, things might not necessarily be your fault, but you have to fix them anyway. But really just that you weren't put in this situation. You didn't get to the situation where holidays were difficult and you felt really depressed and suicidal. You didn't get to that situation on your own. There are a lot of different things that you've been responding to and continue to respond to every day. And so we need to be aware of the effects that generations before us, whatever was stressful going on in their life, their brain and their body was like, we better make this connection, we better make this pattern, remember that this is dangerous. And then that gets passed on, right? And then we're stuck with these nervous systems that are super upregulated, really wanting to fight or flight, always quick to really emotional bursts and things like that. And that's because that's a byproduct of our nervous system. So if your body keeps score of what happens to it, what do emotions have to do with it? And so emotions, I think there's lots of really great movies about, what emotions do and how they interplay, when I think of what are those movies called? The
Inside Out.
Inside Out, yeah. Those are such good movies of explaining really hard concepts, but I do think of them as separate entities, fear, anger, sadness, joy. They do live as separate entities within you, and then it's how they work together that create your responses to things. So emotions are responses to the world around you. They're psychological states, and an emotion is comprised of a thought, a feeling. They're associated with body cues or physiologic changes, right? So if I'm afraid, my eyes are really wide, my chest might get really tight. Sounds and light might be really sensitive to me. I'd have shallow breaths because I'm scared. I might have butterflies in my stomach. Maybe you're fidgety with your hands and feet. You have sensitivity to touch. So I think of fear is a psychological state. and it's linked to all of these things that are happening to your body, right? And so if your body is getting all of these cues, it's like, oh, you have a tight chest, Alexa, you're breathing really shallow, your heart is pounding, are we afraid right now? And your body goes, yep, we must be afraid, and, sends that right up to my brain. And then the emotional part of me is like, well, we need greater sense of safety. Alexa, I see the fear thing is happening. Your physiological cues, I'm picking up on them because I'm always so aware. I'm such a helpful brain. I'm aware of all of your physiologic cues. And so then it says, oh, we must be afraid. And then my brain is like, great, we need a greater sense of safety then if we're afraid. And then, my old coping mechanisms is like, okay, well, what do we need for a greater sense of safety? Oh, well, I need to be drunk because then I won't be afraid because then I'm not thinking anything. Or I just need to do something really risky because then the state that I'm in will feel even safer because I'm doing something that's of greater risk to me, right? So those are the parts that the fact that fear comes with these body cues and this state, we can't change that. That's how that emotion goes, but we can change how we then respond to that, right? Anger is a really good one. So just in the red here, so tightened brow, clenched jaw, especially if you have like a lot of jaw pain or you get headaches. Lots of people clench their jaw at night and don't realize. Tight shoulders, right? Because people, when they're angry, they start to tense up their shoulders. They have flexed biceps, right? Your abs might feel really tight. Your blood flow increases to your limbs, right? So, it goes from your limbs to your to the center of you. And so then you start to, like, your hands, they might, because blood is pumping, you might, like, your hands feel warm, your face is warm, your toes are curled. And so when your body perceives that you are experiencing anger, it's like, great, thanks so much for giving us a cue. We're going to do something about this. What this means when we feel anger is I need something to change. I need something to move, or I need something to change. And then, your parts of your brain are like, well, how could we get something to change? Well, I could, like, manipulate this person to get this to change. I could use physical force to get this to change, right? And so then that's when you start to pick up on maybe the unhealthy or not so great coping mechanisms of, so great that your body recognizes that there's anger and that something needs to change and move, but then how do you go about doing that? And something to consider too is that it's really hard to identify what emotion you're having. Outside of, like, sadness or anger, which I think is pretty easy to tell, these really nuanced emotions like disgust, that's a very complex emotion. And to be honest with you, I didn't really know how to label my thoughts. Like, I was like, oh, I'm doing fine. And then, if I were to read my symptoms, I'd be like, oh, I am definitely experiencing sadness right now. Like, my body feels really heavy. My breathing is slow. I feel numb, like sense of not enough sensation. Just things feel heavy and weighted. And not realizing that you can sometimes tell what your emotion is by being aware of what's happening to your body. So if you were even to close your eyes right now and do a body check-in, you might not even realize that you'd be able to identify what emotion you have based off of what's happening. So are your eyes furrowed? Is your mind active? Do you have a really fast acting mind? Is it slow acting? Check your jaw. Is it clenched? If when you go and you make that sound that's your jaw being unclenched. That's like its neutral position. So if it's not like that, and when you go it feels different than how your jaw is, then your jaw is clenched. What's happening with your shoulders? Push them really up to your ear and then push them down. And you're like, yeah, they are starting to, sort of clench up. What's happening to your toes? Are they curled right now? Are they feeling really cold? Are they feeling really warm? Do they feel like there's needles in them? Do you feel fidgety, like you can't stop? Even just like your chest. How does it feel? Does it feel tight? Does it feel really loose and happy and joyful and it feels open, feels active? Does it feel like your heart is heavy, like it feels like it's like a weight in your chest? Is your stomach, what's happening with it? Like, are you digesting? Are you hungry? Is your stomach like super active? It's like, just gurgling, right? And it's just, or is it not moving at all? And like the last time you had a bowel movement, who knows, right? So you can even look at people, like figure out your own physiological cues and check in with your body. And then you can work backwards and say, okay, which of these emotions am I based off of my symptoms? Because sometimes you don't know. I wasn't taught about emotions, so I didn't know what it meant to be angry or to be fearful or to have disgust or to feel joy. Like I had no, theoretically as a concept, but I myself didn't know how to label them. And it's only really in the last couple of years that I've actually learned to be able to distinguish emotions. Something I do want to talk about, which is a really interesting emotion that I didn't realize that I seem to have often, is disgust. So that's when you want to look away to avoid. So not like respectfully or looking away, because you don't want to look someone in the eye, not that kind. But when you say something like, oh, this happened to me when I was a kid, and then you start to look, right? You look away. You don't look directly at that person. You start to look away. And you start to have this yuck, like your throat feels like it's clenched or it's closing. Maybe there's like a lump in your throat. Your stomach starts to feel really clenched. There's a pit in your stomach. I didn't actually realize that when you're feeling that, that's the feeling of disgust. And that means those physiological cues, the things that they're telling your brain is like, hey, we're experiencing this. We need to avoid consuming or metabolizing whatever was just said. I don't like that. I don't want that. I don't want that to be a part. I don't want those experiences to be a part of me, or like that makes me sick. I don't like that. And so what do we do to avoid consuming or metabolizing a thought or an experience? We turn away from it, right? We're like, oh, I don't. So then we don't talk about things. And so you can start to see then how it becomes really easy for maybe people in our lives who are like, man, those people never talk about their problems, or like they never talk about what happened in their life, or, and it's often, this is because disgust, shame is really a combination of disgust, fear, anger, and sadness. It's like a combination of all of those things. So recognizing what's happening in your body versus joy, like what does it actually, some people are, like, I've never felt joy in my life. I don't know what that means to feel that way, to feel light and happy. And that's really sad, but also not totally uncommon for Native people, where they actually don't know what it means to feel happy or to feel joy. So maybe I, for one, didn't know what that felt like. So I looked up these little freaking cues. So a slow mind, my eyes are, what does this say? Tilted eyes. Anyways, so eyes that aren't crunched and they're not super wide and they're not super open. Your breathing is easy, right? My breathing is coming from my stomach. So my stomach is rising before my chest. And you can know that because if you put your hands here and you go, and which one rises higher? And it's probably going to be your chest. And so to breathe from your diaphragm, you have to literally like breathe into your stomach, right? Because you want your stomach to rise more than your chest. That's what actually taking a regular breath is supposed to feel like. That's what all your breaths are supposed to feel like. But for most of us, we're like, and then it's your chest breathing, right? But joy is feeling light. It's feeling excited. Your hands, they feel soft. Your face feels soft. Maybe, like you feel warm, but it's not overly hot. And so just this sensation of light. And that's kind of what you see in this image too, right? Of what joy looks like, feeling bubbly. Mm-hmm. And so joy, when your body senses that that's what's happening, what is it telling your brain? Well, my needs are met in this moment. And then your nervous system's like, oh, our needs are met in this moment? Well, I don't know, right? And then it's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. I've never experienced this before. And then people, right, when they start to experience joy and happiness, they start to self-sabotage. And that's usually, that's why. Because it's if you haven't experienced joy, it's an unrecognizable feeling, you aren't used to it. Then when you have it, it's danger, right? Because your body, it's like, new things are dangerous, Alexa. Didn't you know that? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. bad. And then my body's like, well, joy, this joy, this new thing. I don't like it. It's new to me. Remember how we think everything new is bad? And so then I have to actively tell my brain, hey man, like new things aren't necessarily bad. And like joy is a good feeling. And then I do things habitually so that my body and my brain and my nervous system starts to be like, joy is actually a really beautiful place to be in. Not all the time every day, but I do experience moments of joy because I can tap into what's happening, right? Because before my brain is like, no, we're not going there, Alexa. We can't be happy about this. What if something happens? And so your body really, it perfectly mirrors what your unconscious thought patterns are, the internal story that you tell yourself. And then so your body speaks to you through your emotions, right? It's interpreting the physical environment, the situation, your body cues, and it's coming out with an output that's like, hey, deal with this thing, Alexa. I'm like, okay, how do I deal with that? And so there are constant streams of intense emotion that people feel, right? And then they get overtaxed. Their autonomic nervous system, remember the thing that tells you like the parasympathetic or sympathetic, this flight or fight or rest and digest. There's just constant streams of information. Well, we're happy. Now we're sad. No. We're really, really angry now. No, we're really sad, right? And so your nervous system's like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? And your neural networks, like truly they start to jam. It's kind of like when you drive and your one foot is on the gas pedal and the other is on the brake. Like it's just like, right? Like you're not getting anywhere. And all parts of your autonomic nervous system are becoming taxed. And when you live a really chaotic lifestyle and your autonomic nervous system is never getting a chance to flick off, it's just gonna stay on the on position. And that's why lots of people who get stressed about everything, it's because their nervous system is like literally in overdrive and the gas pedal is getting faster and faster and the brakes aren't kicking in. And so the brakes for us is our frontal lobe, which is the thing that helps us make like big adult decisions and to think things through. And those are the coping that we're going to talk about in the later part of this talk of what can you do then so that you're not stuck in this autopilot of like anger or fear or sadness or disgust and to actually have those moments of joy. So does your autonomic nervous system control your emotions, or do your emotions control your autonomic nervous system? And so the answer really is both. Because they are inextricably linked. Because emotions, they cause your nervous system to respond in different ways, depending on the emotion, right? We've gone through quite a few of the ones, different emotions. And so negative emotions tell your autonomic nervous system, thing in the blue here, it tells this blue box here, it says, hey, like, we really want to make sure that, we need to change our breathing, we need to change our eyesight, we need to change our temperature, right? There's always information that's feeding into our nervous system. Where are we getting that information? I don't know, the things we see, the things we smell, the things that our brain are conditioned to think are really bad or really good. And so they play into each other. It's kind of like what came first, a chicken or an egg. Do emotions control our nervous system, or does our nervous system control then the emotions we have? And they're so inextricably linked. And that's why emotions, I don't know, they seem really easy, but they're not. Like they're just, it's such a huge interplay that's happening within your body. And some emotions are actually connected to very specific parts of the fight or flight response. And so you can kind of see in this diagram here that we're looking at, there's certain emotions, right? Rage, anger, irritation, frustration. Those are all in the fight, this is your sympathetic, right? The flight, panic, fear, anxiety, worry, concern. So this is like where people go, and then sometimes it gets too much anger, too much panic, too much fear, shut down. Then people freeze, right? They collapse, the immobility. And that's when you're in the dorsal vagal part, which is a part of your parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, except the rest that you're doing is a complete shutdown or dissociating or feeling numb or depressed because your body's conserving its energy. It said, hey, you've been in this fight or flight for way too long. And so we're either going to come back down out of that into social engagement, into joy, and, you know, go back and have these fluctuations, versus when it's just boom, 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 boom. And that's why people collapse like that, or they feel shame or shut down, or they feel hopelessness. You know, they feel trapped. They feel really like, you know, where you're like, I literally can't move out of my bed. And that's because you've overdone it to your nervous system. And so your body, because it's always keeping score and it's always looking out for you, tells you to freeze, stop doing what you're doing. And then, but then in order to come out of freeze, right, we have to deactivate. In order to get to social, to this part, this nice green area where we have joy, we're in the present, we're grounded, we're mindful, we're compassionate, curious, we're open. In order to get to that state, we have to move through freeze and then come down through our sympathetic nervous system in order to get there. So this is actually a really, really hard place to be, freeze, because it's, you know, it's kind of like it's the peak of when your body can't handle something anymore. And so then it does that. And then to complicate things further, and something that I learned and was really offended when someone said this to me, my psychiatrist, she said, Alexa, emotions aren't facts. They're not facts. And I said, well, you don't know that. I was like, well, they're real. Like, what do you mean they're not facts? Of course they are. They're my truth. She said, yeah, something could be your truth and your reality, but that doesn't make them a fact. And I just remember being so offended when she said this. So then I'm like, well, you don't believe me. You don't believe me. And she said, no, Alexa, you know that I believe you. It's just, think about that. They're not facts. But it doesn't always feel that way, right? Because, and especially the stronger the emotion. So if you're like, oh, I feel really, really angry about the fact that, you know, my kid opened this present and they hated it and they're so ungrateful, and don't they know that I work really hard for these gifts, and, you know, and then you start to get angry, but then that anger is just so high. Your body is like, well, we feel really, really strongly that we're really angry right now, so it must be even more true. So we fall into this trap of thinking if it's a really strong emotion, that must mean it's true. But it's not. They're not inherently facts. And so this isn't meant to demean people's feelings, because what you're feeling is absolutely real. But it empowers you in the sense that means you're not stuck in an emotion. Or how you feel about things aren't stuck in a certain way, right? Because you can change them. You're not stuck in emotions because emotions aren't facts. They're your nervous system, your past life experience, your current life experience, your brain, all of that sensory stuff we were talking about, interpreting everything and creating an emotional output for you. It's like, here's all this junk, we're going to put it through the processor. Alexa, this means you are sad. I'm like, oh, well, my body came to this realization. This must be the truth. This must be what the situation is. When in reality, that's just my interpretation of it. And technically, someone's interpretation can be different. So emotions aren't universal truth and they're not facts, meaning that you can change them. Emotions are really just messengers that are meant to illuminate for us where we have a sore spot. So I also try not to be mad at emotions either. So I'm like, why am I feeling frustrated at this? Like, I shouldn't even care about this. This is stupid. Or, you know, like, I don't even know why I'm crying about this. Like, this doesn't even matter to me, right? And so, but emotions are so important because they really illuminate to you where there's either like a nervous system breakdown or a pattern of belief that you're coming up against, right? That your brain, it did a great job of creating this pattern. Alexa, remember when this happens, this happens. And so, and then I'm experiencing something and that's not the pattern. I was like, but brain, you told me that was the pattern. And then you're noticing, right? Oh, that's not what's happening right now. And so then people, right, you start to become panicked. You start to become upset. And so that's, emotions tell you when you're coming up to a block, when you're experiencing injustice. They are an output of like the bajillion things that your body and brain are always monitoring, but they're not facts. And so we can change them. We absolutely can change them. We're not stuck with them. And that brings us to really our, I guess what's cognitive behavioral therapy is linked to, and what I think is very helpful, because your feelings create a behavior. Maybe I'm always angry, and what that means is that I always yell. I'm always, if anger and is the thing, and my body's like, okay, well, we want this to be linked, so if you're angry, you need to yell. So then every time I feel angry, I yell, which is the behavior. And then my behavior and first is the thoughts. Well, I'm angry and I'm yelling, so that means that I must be really angry, right? Because I'm doing the thing that tells me I'm angry. So it's kind of this vicious cycle of your feelings create your behavior. Your behavior reinforces your thoughts because it makes it seem more true to you that you should be angry or sad about a situation. And then the thoughts you have create feelings. Oh, well, like nobody listens to me and I'm unheard. Well, now I feel angry again. And which creates a behavior, which then makes me want to yell. And then I yell, and then people, do the same thing. They don't want to listen to me, and then I feel not listened to, and then it makes me more angry, right? Like it's just this vicious cycle. And so, but there are ways to hack this, literally to biohack this, because our minds are powerful alchemizers. Alchemy is like the process of putting things together and then creating something that comes from it, whether that's good or bad. And so our brains are super good at doing this, meaning that we can interrupt any of these areas. We can interrupt our feeling, our behavior, or thought, and it's going to affect the others. So if my feeling, but it first starts with awareness, because if you're not aware that you have a thought, that you have a feeling, that you have a behavior, then you're just an autopilot and probably harming people in your life, because you're not really realizing the actions that you do that impact people, right? Like you're not, and you know those people because they're just like, it's almost like they have no thought. They're just like, they do really awful, mean things. You're like, why did you do that? Like, what's wrong? And then those are the people where there's no awareness, right? That the frontal lobe, which is the executive functioning part of your brain, maybe it's not developed, maybe it's underdeveloped, and they're just an autopilot. So you really need that awareness. For me, the easiest way that I do it is I check in with my body. That's the easiest way, because what does checking in with my body do? It tells me what my feeling is, because then I work backwards, like I was saying. For some people, they can just name it. They're like, I know this is how I feel right now. I'm like, what? This is brilliant. Little kids are really good at that. Mom, I'm angry. And I'm like, man, you're so good at labeling your emotions. But I think, okay, what am I feeling in my body? And then I put those little things together. Oh, yes, this means that we're afraid. This means that we're angry. This means that we're happy, we're sad. So then once I know my feeling, right, maybe my feeling is sadness. And not only that, I'm in like that like peak point where I'm in freeze. So now I am sad and I'm in that freeze response where I don't want to get up. I don't want to move. My brain is like, you've overdone it and we're shutting you down. Like, stop moving, stop thinking. Right? And if I have awareness of that, hey, I'm feeling really sad. My toes and my hands feel really cold. Great. So what does that do? Well, my brain's like, well, let's keep those things warm, right? So I grab a heating pack. I then warm up my hands and my toes. What starts to happen? Then my brain's like, Alexa, why are your hands and your feet warming up? That's not what happens when sadness is occurring. This must mean we're moving to a different emotion. I say, yeah, that is what's happening. That's why I'm doing this, is, because I'm sort of biohacking, and because my body's going to read the physical cues and the physical sensations. So if I change what those physical sensations are by doing something, then I start to change it. Like I literally start to change it. So my body's like, okay, why are your hands and your feet cold? Oh, they're actually really warm. Oh, you seem to be breathing a lot more slowly, Alexa. I guess maybe, are we feeling content right now? Right? And so then my behavior, how does my behavior start to so that's feelings. That's the one part of the triangle where I can change how I feel about something by changing my body's physical cues. Change my temperature, change my heart rate. I can dilate my eyes, right? Like there's lots of different things. Versus your behavior, you can intercept. If I change my behavior, it'll automatically change the trajectory of my thoughts and my feelings, right? If I change my thoughts about something, like, oh, instead of thinking, someone cuts in front of me when I'm driving, and I say, oh, that person, like, they're just so inconsiderate. They're not even, why are they driving like that? Like, it's just, they're just being stupid. Like, I wish they weren't doing that. Like, that's so difficult for me. And so what the thoughts start to do, right? My body is, it's like, Alexa, you're having these thoughts that are kind of like irritated. I see your arms or your blood pressure is rising. It's like, we must be angry right now. So when we're angry, what do? We rant at other people. We yell at our kids. We do all the things that we do when we're feeling that way. Versus having the awareness, I'm having the thought that this person is like, I hate the way they're driving. It's an inconvenience. They're ruining my day. If I change my thought to like, oh, this person is like just having a driving day and like, I just want to be safe in my car and I'm going to get to my next location. Then my body's like, oh, so we're not angry. We're not. Okay, well then we're not gonna hunch up our shoulders. We're not gonna yell at our kids, right? Because we've changed. So as long as we can break somewhere the behavior, the thought, or the feeling, then we can actually change the degree to which we suffer. You can actually change the amount of suffering you experience in your life, which is actually very radical thought. And my psychiatrist told her, I also was like, you're full of SHIT, like you don't know what you're talking about, like how could you, like, I don't create the amount of suffering I have in my life. Canada does. The government does. Colonization does. And she says, Alexa, you might not have caused 100% of the problems that are in your life, but you're going to have to deal with them anyways. So how you think about things will directly relate to how much you're going to suffer or not. And when she said that, I like cried and I was angry and upset and I was like, I hate you. Because, I was used to like, well, I didn't cause the fact that I'm this way, that I was ever suicidal or that I was ever using substances, like, and that's a really hard thing to sit with and comprehend, that the degree to which you are suffering, like you play a part in that. You decide how much suffering you are doing, and it's just not a great, it's not a great realization. So then you're like, but I've been suffering my whole life. So that means I've been causing my own internal suffering? Yep. Because but the unfair thing is that most people aren't taught about their thoughts, their feelings, their behavior, right? The kids aren't even really taught this. And so we're disadvantaged in the sense that especially if you're an adult learner that's like calling in and you haven't learned about this, like if you had known about this as a kid, yeah, you would still experience probably crappy things because you're a Native person, but you wouldn't be suffering from it as much because you would be changing your thought, your behavior, or your feeling, and moving through things a lot easier. Okay, so we're at the hour mark. What we're going to do is if people have questions, they can put them in the chat. I'll respond to them. Otherwise, we're going to do a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at, what time is it? 2:57. So like it's a 3. So at 3:10 is when we're going to come back, and then we're going to finish off talking about tips and tricks, like actual things that we can do to change and break one of those thoughts, feelings, or behaviors, so that we have less suffering over the holidays and just for our lives in general. So please feel free to get up, drink some water, get a snack. We'll be back at 3:10, and we'll start the break by answering any questions, which you can put into the chat. Okay, thanks folks.
Hi, welcome back. Just wanted to let everyone know that we will be posting a link to survey if you would like to fill one out. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered into the draw for a chance to win a wellness bundle.
Yeah, a self-care basket.
And there's no rush to complete it right away, as the survey will be up and active for 3 days after the stream.
Awesome. Great. And your feedback is super valuable. So that's usually where we end up getting the new topics that you want to hear about. That's how we did a talk about menopause, is because it was really requested. So good and bad, we do want to hear how to make this better, topics that you want to know more about. So it's not just like a survey for a survey. I'm like, we actually read all of them. And the prize is pretty good. Kara, the person who puts our prizes together, puts a lot of cool stuff. Like there's candles, and like it's like a nice prize, I will say. So to summarize, so we have gone over really the complex interplay of your body, your emotions, your nervous system, and trying to reduce the amount of suffering that you may or may not have over the holidays. And so the next part of this talk is really just going to be about strategies and tips and tricks for things to essentially attack one of those things, the feelings, the thoughts, or the behaviors. And also maybe just things that I don't know that people think of in terms of self-care, because I do not necessarily think of self-care as like bubble baths and face masks, though that might be a part of your self-care. For me, I'm like, we need to dismantle the state, and that's my self-care. But anyway, so I do want to talk about some of the things that we think about that probably we should do over this winter solstice, because this is when our ancestors would have done it, and also seasonally, if we're moving our bodies with the season to try and be in line, to really have a lot more silence and rest. So really a lot of what I was talking about in the first part of the series as well is something called the polyvagal theory. And so that's what I was talking about in regards to the sympathetic nervous system, which we see here in the middle. There's this person on this ladder, right? I'm feeling under threat. My body is telling me to fight or run. Ooh, I can hear that over there. Versus, when we are feeling overwhelmed, frozen, disconnected, right? And remember, in the other image, we slid upwards because we were freezing. But what will help when we're in a frozen state to move back up, to be active, or when we're in ventral vagal, how do we keep people in the state of feeling joy and safe and feeling like they can engage? And so that's really what we want more of. I think what a lot of Native people specifically need to be told is to rest and slow down. Because rest is resistance. So oftentimes, people when they feel like, oh, I have to take a day off, or like before you consider pulling a double shift on winter solstice or doing extra work or working over your holidays, if you have the day off, truly take the day off. And I don't mean take the day off to be more productive, because I don't like when people say, well, yeah, we want to make sure that you're recharged and energized to return back to work, because that's productivity and that's capitalism. Right? So feeling like you need to be rested so that you can continue to have an output, which is maybe like the number of, checks you invoice or the number of presentations you output, right? And this is what this quote is about. We're not just born to center our entire existence on work and labor. You were born to heal, to grow, to be of service to yourself and community, to practice, to experiment, to create, to have space to dream and to connect. And so, because when sometimes I think, especially during the holidays, we fall into the trap of grind culture and then applauding ourselves for being a really, really hard worker. I say, to me, that's not something I would be proud of, because I'm an efficient worker. I am a rested worker. I have a regulated nervous system. Like, those are the things that I would advertise in terms of feeling good about. But I know, like, really set down your electronic devices, your phones, be present in the moment. If you have kids or housemates or friends or loved ones, spend quality time together and really unplugged from technology. And it can be easier to believe resting is simply about retiring to bed. Like, sometimes people are like rest and they think collapse in their bed at the end of the day. But that's not rest. Actually, that's collapse. That's right when we were talking about the dorsal ventral versus the dorsal vagal, right? Those are, you're right, they're both under your parasympathetic nervous system, but one serves you and the other doesn't. And so when you rest is also not just sleeping, though it could involve that. One thing to know that's a common myth is people can't catch up on sleep. That's a thing that they think they can do. They're like, I'll just keep going and going and going. And then I'll just catch up on sleep over the weekend. And no, try to have a good sleep every night because you can't catch up on sleep. That's a really common misconception. But the thing is that why evolutionarily we're designed to have sleep is literally for like our DNA and our cells to repair and restructure. And so if we're not actually having that time during the day, it's just not happening. That's just a loss of not being able to have the repair that would have happened during sleep, right? So there's no such thing as catching up on sleep. So just actually give yourself sleep every night and prioritize that. Because what ends up happening is then you just like the stuff that needed to happen gets delayed and then you develop illness. That's what happens. And rest is, taking things slow, like moving at a pace that's not, because nothing is truly urgent. And I remember once someone said that to me, and one of the Emerge docs was talking, and I was like, what do you mean something isn't truly urgent? Of course it is. If someone's having a heart attack, like, that's truly, we need to act urgently. She said, Alexa, if I was in the bathroom and someone was having a heart attack, I would finish going to the bathroom and then I would go to that heart attack. Like, there is always time to breathe, to stop, to pause, even when it's actually urgent. Like for situations where like time is life. And that's just really changed how I thought about rest. That really nothing is urgent. It feels that way, right? Because of capitalism telling us, hey, you need to get this done. You need to get this done as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, while also maintaining this, and this. And so we really need to deconstruct our own beliefs and behaviors that align with capitalism, because resting and allowing ourselves to be in a dream space, which is where we dream of new ways and new futures, that's how that becomes possible. Being stuck in this like day in, day out, that means we don't have time to think about, one, how we're going to overthrow the government. Two, we don't have time to be well and to take care of ourselves. And then we fall into the trap of like, well, buy these quick dopamine things that will help you feel good so that you can continue to be productive for the system. Like, I think of it as almost like Star Wars and the Empire. And like, that's like, we're constantly under the Empire. And so people will say, well, I take care of my community. I do all the fasting. I run all the sweat lodges. I do all of these things. I can't slow down. If I do that, who's going to look after our community? And I think people don't realize that the biggest like get back at you for a Native person to do to the government is actually to rest and to be happy. That's literally the single most resistant, especially I'm a person that like, I like to think about resistance and how to change things and make things better in the world. But the biggest form of resistance is resting and being happy. Because that's literally, think of how many things in the world are designed for you not to feel that way. For you to feel that way despite everything that's happening in the world and to prioritize and to choose that. Like Creator did not put me on the earth to be like, Alexa, make sure you get this Indigenous Women's Health Talk series done in the next 3 hours, right? Or else, like, I was put on this earth to live and to be happy, to be one with nature, to connect to my family and friends, and to rest and to be loved, right? Like, that is actually our true intent and purpose. That's why we were created. So rest is resistance. Rest is reparations. You are not a machine, so stop grinding. And don't be proud of it if you are. I that sounds kind of mean. But when people are like, I'm on my 24th like day of work, I'm like, don't I'm not proud of that. That's awful. Like, you are going to become sick and unwell. Your immune system can't keep up with this if you're not having sleep at night to repair and regenerate. You're literally just killing yourself. And that's great because that's what the empire and what the world wants for Native people. It's like you'll just kill yourself into grinding and into the machine. So really think about that when you have time off, if you're lucky to have time off, to actually take that day to slow down, to rest, to disengage yourself, to be with family and friends, to do things that bring you love and joy and happiness, and be around family if that's good for you, or chosen family or friends. Be out in the light. You're never alone. That was another hard pill I had to swallow. I said, well, so-and-so wasn't there for me, and so-and-so wasn't there for me. And then an elder just kind of smartened me up. She's like, you have relatives outside. It's like, what? She's like, go talk to that tree. You're not alone. I was like, oh, right. That's why when people are like, well, I'm alone on the holidays. I mean, it is really unfortunate when our families really, truly aren't safe spaces. But like, she's like, get over yourself. You're not alone. You have relatives outside. I was like, as soon as she said that, I was like, oh no. I said that wrong. I was like, you're right. Like, what a really small way for me to think, because everything outside is your relation. The rock on your driveway, the trees, the sky, wherever, the snow. So there's so many things within creation that exist that like Creator put on this world for Anishinaabe people to be healthy and well, and they're literally in your house, in your driveway. You look at them every day. You have relatives. They're just, maybe they're outside. They're the animals or the plants or they're the sky. So take a moment, actually rest, actually take the day off, disconnect from your phone, and try to reframe your life and think, how can I be there for my own wellness? Not so that I can be more productive at work, but because that's what I deserve as a human being. That's what I'm entitled to. And so often people have this very, very valid concern, but how can we rest? I need to pay the bills, right? Like, that sounds fine and dandy, Alexa. Like, go ahead and rest and sleep, but like, how am I going to pay my hydro? And that's real. And this is where I say rest is not quitting your busy career. It's fitting yourself into your own sphere. And again, prioritizing self is a really hard thing, especially for, I really think of Indigenous women in the holidays who are so giving of themselves and have nothing at the end of the day because they're go for their family. And then they're just, devastated by the end of the day. Like, you need to put yourself in there. Like, that's you. Remember, your intent and the only thing you can influence is yourself. So be restful, be happy, be joyful. And this idea of like, well, how are the bills going to get paid? I learned lots of beautiful things from elders who, they don't really have secure incomes. They'll say, oh, it's going to work out. I'm like, okay, but like, you don't have, what is your next paycheck? Like, when is your next paycheck? And they're like, it's going to work out. And so, we kind of want to balance this idea of like, we want financial security for ourselves, but also remember that things are going to work out, and just try and challenge the idea. Like, yes, you do need to pay bills, but like, you might be dead, so then you won't have bills to worry about. So like, kind of pick and choose the problem, pick yourself. And this is Trisha Hersey, and the quotes that I've been sharing are from her book, Rest is Resistance, and she's a Black woman. And how she starts this book is by talking about her dad, who I think was a pastor or something at the church and did everything. Community members would come for him for everything. He was always there for everyone's sports games, for everyone's funerals. Like, he just did everything. He was up at 5 a.m. to do the morning papers, to like just all of these things, and just how heroic that was. That's how the community saw him, heroic. And how she saw was her dad slowly becoming sicker and sicker and then dead. And it just talks about how we literally put ourselves in the ground by grinding and trying to do this. And that person, individually, maybe they were helping a lot of different folks, but in the grand scheme of things, like, they weren't. They actually, the most bravest and most probably powerful thing they could have done with their life would have been to prioritize their wellness and then show people that it's possible so that they do the same. Instead, this person was go, super stressed, had a heart attack. And this happens. We see so many Native people with like really, really bad illnesses at a really early age, and it's because of this. And so Trisha, she talks about, I feel like the legacy of exhaustion resides somewhere in all of us, but specifically resides in the bodies of those who have melanated skin. And so this is to say that like there are really big things that are bigger than us that are sort of putting the pressure on us to think that things are urgent and that they need to be done quickly, and that if we don't have the money to pay our hydro, that things are terrible and that everything's going to end. And that's designed that way so that you keep grinding and you keep working. So if you want to resist the empire, don't do that. Rest and be rested and prioritize. That comes before everything else. And then when you start to do that, then we start to become a world that's actually prioritizes that. And this is another one she says. So this is about more than naps. Rest is anything that allows you to connect your body with your mind. So what are ways that your body connects with your mind? Carly beside me right now is beading, right? That is your body physically tactile using beads to then connect to your mind of doing a task and completing something. So rest isn't necessarily just sleep. It's going outside. It's being with family and friends. Maybe, family and friends that aren't stressing you out and, like that kind of, like that's not restful. People who you feel a sense of safety with, it's going outside, it's going for a walk, right? Like those things are a rest even though you're actively moving, because they're helping you get, to that, when we're talking about that dorsal ventral vagal state where you feel open, curious, you feel happy, you feel light. Those things help you get to that state of mind, and we're helping our body do that. Another thing to think about for the holiday seasons, which again, of course, can be really difficult if you have financial insecurity. Something to think about, especially here for folks that are in Thunder Bay at Onwa, we have the Good Food Box. So there is, options for like if food insecurity is an issue for you, there are things that we offer at Onwa that you can check out. But to cook and share a healthy, comforting meal with loved ones. And I think like as Indigenous people, kinship is what always held us together. Sharing space and time to cook, to eat, to nourish our bodies and our loved ones' bodies, like by preparing healthy meals, is really a physical, communal, and spiritual experience. Especially if we're trying to seek out traditional foods, which again might not be accessible to you, but I think of like, especially like when my grandpa makes like a moose stew, and you think of all the love and care that went into that, and when someone brings that and you're just like, oh man, I'm so glad they did that. That feels so good. And there's actually a physiological reason as to why that's the case. But if your brain is always on, it takes care of your thoughts, your movements, your breathing, your heartbeat, your senses, everything. It works hard 24/7. Even when you're asleep, especially when you're asleep, your brain is working really hard. And so you need fuel. Fuel, comes from the different ways in which you eat, and what you fuel to really help your brain keep going makes all of the difference, because what you eat directly affects the structure and function of your brain, which ultimately affects your mood, right? If what you eat affects the structure, like some parts of your brain will be overdeveloped versus underdeveloped if you eat or don't eat certain foods. And the function, meaning how fast it works to create ideas, how fast it goes to create actions, literally that depends on food and the things you eat. And then if, of course, if the structure and function of your brain is off in any way, that affects your mood. And so kind of like an expensive car, your brain functions best when it gets like premium fuel. So really thinking about eating high quality foods that contain a lot of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, because that nourishes the brain and protects it from oxidative stress. Oxidative stress it's like when the waste, which is free radicals that are in the air, that are in the environment, that are around us all the time, they are produced when the body uses oxygen, right? And which can damage cells. And so oxidative stress is always occurring to our cells. And that's what I mean about like, there's no catching up on sleep. Once oxidative stress has happened, you need rest in order to repair that. And then you've missed a night where you didn't get to do that. But eating food with lots of antioxidants, and most of our traditional foods are naturally antioxidant like superfoods. Like wild rice and blueberries are prime examples of superfoods that are in the world that are like good for everything. There's even like blueberries have like a specific property that actually helps with tumors and reducing the size of tumors. Like that's a well-known phenomenon and thing that happens because of, think of antioxidant food as like cancer preventing. And that's a really big thing that kills our people, our Indigenous people, is cancer. And so eating like low premium food, like, things that are processed or refined, they get to the brain, but it has little ability to get rid of them. So if you're having a bunch of sugars, which is harmful for the brain over the long term, we do need sugar for our brain. So don't be one of those people that eats zero sugar, because then you'll have hypoglycemic episodes and you'll feel like crap. So you need things within moderation, but only having a diet that's refined sugars and carbs, your brain is not actually getting the fuel to think, to make patterns, and therefore your mood is going to decrease. That's why when you eat a really good meal that feels healthy, you feel good, right? When you eat something and you're like, that tasted really good, and I feel energetic and I feel good, that's literally the antioxidant properties of food that you're eating that are then fueling your brain's function. And so also having a diet in refined sugars and impaired brain function also worsens mood disorders like depression. So if your brain is deprived of good quality nutrition and free radicals or damaging inflammatory cells are circulating within this small enclosed space, right? That's brain tissue injury. That's what's happening. And so consequences are to be expected. And so it's really important, like on multiple levels. One, the things that you're eating over the holidays, to really think about like the intention of what you're putting into your body. Because even like, I'm not really a firm believer either though, when guilting yourself into being like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that. Like, still enjoy yourself. Don't make eating food a completely limiting process. But if every single thing you're eating is like junk, every single meal, think about like, what am I giving to my brain? What am I giving to my immune system that has to keep me going? What am I giving to my nervous system that somehow has to help me survive these holidays? Nothing. You're giving it nothing. So you need to be eating whatever you can, with whatever means necessary, like money put towards healthy foods, even with financial insecurity, is like worth its weight in millions, because it makes a huge difference. And also the act of cooking and sharing healthy meals, right? That releases dopamine and serotonin, which are the happy hormones, and the feel good, relaxing hormones, which counteracts cortisol, which is the stress hormone, right? Like there's lots of neuroendocrine processes that are improved and improve health outcomes by cooking and sharing healthy and comforting meals with loved ones. Something that lots of people know about, but for specific conditions, is deep pressure touch stimulation. So most people, how they hear about this is like when like kids have autism or ADHD or ADHD, and they're like the kids who ask their teacher, they're like, can you squeeze me as hard as you possibly can? Like, can you just squeeze? And they ask to be really, really, really squeezed tightly by their teachers. This happens a lot in preschools and just like grade school. So deep pressure activities. So this is essentially when we use our proprioceptive nerves, which are the things that tell us, Alexa, you're wearing a dress, Alexa, there's sweat on your lip, right? Those are the things that's telling me the senses that I feel in my body. It's when we use that to our advantage and we put weight on ourselves and pressure. And so sometimes you can get that pressure when you hug someone really tight. So for the most part, outside of, if you're claustrophobic or you have other reasons why deep pressure would be triggering, for the most part, when people have a lot of stimulation issues, like everything irks them, they're like, oh, I don't like that sound. Oh, I don't like that texture. Oh, everything is bothering them. Putting deep pressure touch stimulation helps decrease your fight or flight response, which is activated by anxiety. So if you have something that's like 5 to 12% of your body weight, and you somehow and that's what people use the weighted blankets for. That's why people use them, is because they keep them. You don't put them on your neck or your face, especially when you're sleeping, because if you have sleep apnea, then your chest can't rise, right? Your sleep apnea is going to get worse if you have a weighted blanket. So you keep it from your chest down, and then that's why when you get a hug, it feels really good. Or when you're laying on the floor or on the land, and it kind of like feels good. Like that's because there's deep pressure sensors that are all in your body, and when they get activated, they start to push out those hormones that put you into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, the really good feeling. And so you don't necessarily need someone to hug you in order to feel this way, because there's a lot of ways in which you can get access to this, whether that's like things like a foot massage, right? And that's why, outside of if you're super extremely ticklish on your foot, most people, when they get their foot rubbed, it feels good. Why? Well, because you're putting deep pressure. That's why massages feel good. That's why when you squeeze something, you have putty in your hand and you're squeezing, it's because you're activating the deep pressure of your hands. When you get bear hugs and you're like, ooh, I love hugs that come from, my Mishomis because he hugs me so deep, and you hold that hug and it feels really good. That's why some people really like weighted blankets. There's things like even like compression clothing. So for example, like for like menstrual products, I use menstrual boxers. And they're very like tight, but not tight in a really uncomfortable way, but they're just like, I feel like because they're compressive, they kind of just like hold things together. And so it feels really comforting. So there's lots of times where I'm like wearing like menstrual underwear, which is like super, super comfortable, not during my period because I didn't realize why. I'm like, why do I love this feeling of like when something isn't tight and unbearable, but it's compressing, like it has this, and you can even do that to your arms, like to your stomach, like that feels good. You feel good when you compress yourself. And that's because we're really accessing those proprioceptive nerves, which pushes you into a parasympathetic state. So this is the other thing is like heavy pushing, right? A log roll. This is like something kids, especially a lot of kids with autism enjoy, is when you have them like rolled in a blanket or something, like how you used to be when you were a baby, and then you just like roll them, and because that's like deep pressure, like, like all on your body. Sometimes I'll make my husband lay on me. Like I'm just like, hey, can you just like lay on top of me? And he's like, well, I do weigh 300 pounds. So you don't need a 300-pound person to lay on you to have deep pressure. I like that though, to the point that I'm just like, lay on me and just put all your weight on me, and it feels so good. And if you're one, you might not be one of those people, but if you are, that's why. It's because it's accessing those parts of your peripheral nervous system, and that's why it works. So if you're at a relative's house, you're out and about in the community, you feel really stressed, you feel really overwhelmed, just remember, you have access to deep pressure. You can literally squeeze yourself. You can, if you really want, invest in a weighted blanket. You could have putty that's always in your hands. When you give hugs, give really big hugs that are like chest to chest, and you're bear hugging it. As consent wise. As long as people are consenting to that. But be one of those people, because that's a really easy way to change your body's physical cues. Because then it's like, oh, we're feeling compressed. We feel safe. I don't think we're angry or sad. Like that's not how Alexa experiences fear, sadness, or anger. So we must be none of those things. So we must be joy. Or your body will start to pick up these cues of like, well, deep pressure is usually that makes me feel good, and if I feel good, then my body is responding as such, and so then my nervous system will respond as such. Something that I've talked about before, so that folks, this might be like for some people who've been to every single talk will be like, wow, you've talked about this so much, Dr. Alexa, but it's really about your vagus nerve, which is your 10th cranial nerve, and I think this is such a life hack to know about this nerve. It's called the wandering nerve in Latin. That's what the Latin translation of it is. But it's wandering in the sense that it connects to almost every single part of your body, from your throat all the way down to your bowels. So it's like the one nerve. It's so extensively distributed. So, right, it's a nerve that comes down your spinal cord, right? And it's connected to almost everything. And so when you find ways to activate it, your nervous system automatically, it's like the vagus nerve is like the big boss. They're like the big boss. Where like if the vagus nerve comes in and your body's like, oh, we're definitely parasympathetic. We should definitely be resting and digesting and like it just like makes you calmer, because that's what being parasympathetic is about. And that's what we want for our mental health, is to be in that state. And so the way to access this, because the nerve, it like starts in the medulla oblongata, which is a part of your brain. It connects to the spinal cord. There's so many branches, your neck, your abdominal organs. This is something to consider, because it's in charge of sensing so many different things, meaning that something as simple as singing. So regardless if you're doing singing at singing at powwows, drumming circles, talking with someone, or talking to yourself, talking out loud, praying, why those things feel good, I mean, obviously on like a mental, spiritual level, like they do, they have benefit in that sense. But physically, what's happening is that your vagus nerve is connected to your larynx, it's connected to your voice box. So anytime you have the that vibration, you're automatically stimulating your vagus nerve, right? And it travels. So it's like, oh, my heart feels nice now, my stomach feels nice. So singing, there's spiritual reasons that singing keeps us well, connects us to spirit and to creation, but otherwise your vagus nerve is connected to your vocal cords, which is the muscles in the back of your throat. So that vibration of the song will activate the rest and digest, which will decrease your cortisol. Talking, of course, is therapeutic, but speaking aloud allows us to access the part of the brain that encourages the formation and processing of thoughts, right? So when you say things out loud versus when you think them, you're using different parts of your brain to do that. So when I'm just internally thinking, not saying anything out loud, that's probably why it's harder, and that's why lots of people like talking things out loud, because you're literally using the language part of your brain to then help interpret what you're saying, which is how people help with their own comprehension, right? They'll say things out loud. But talking is therapeutic. One, because you're telling someone else the stuff, and shame lives in our bodies when there's silence and we don't want to tell anybody something. So we want to just, stop doing that. Like, talk to people so that you're not living in that shame and that silence, but also you're vibrating your voice cord. Like, even when you like put your hand on your voice box in the middle of your throat and just talk or go and you start to feel there's a vibration every single time you talk and you make a noise, you do something. This is automatically activating your vagus nerve, which can help you feel more calm when you're not feeling calm. Something that I think about, because we talked about the responses to the freeze mode. Remember, that's when you're like fight or flight, and it's like, wow, we're peaking, now we're collapsing, and now we're frozen, we're numb, dissociated, overwhelmed. And so the response to freeze mode is actually quite intuitive. You need to de-thaw yourself. It's literally like being cold, and that's how people feel. Their hands feel cold, their feet feel cold, everything feels cold. And so literally you need to warm yourself up. That's how you move out of freeze, to come back down to the sympathetic, to then come back down to the ventral vagal, or the parasympathetic, the happy place. And so what does that look like? Putting on a heating pack, taking a warm bath, drinking a cup of tea, a bowl of soup, a pleasant smell, connecting to sensations or fabric on you or your face, right? Because frozen means inability to feel. So you need to introduce movement. So for example, if you're someone that's like absolutely crushed, you're in bed, you're like, I need to get up and I just can't. The easiest way to start to go is to just like wiggle your toes and then wiggle your fingers and literally start activating your nervous system to start waking up, to move yourself out of freeze. You need heat and you need movement. So if you're dissociating, you're angry, you're numb, you're stuck, that's what you have to do. So shift in your chair, like that's even a subtle movement. I think of like wiggling your fingers. When people are really, really frozen, I like to try and get them to the sweat lodge. For myself, that's like a practice that I enjoy. Not everyone does that, but if you do, the heat and steam from the rocks, one, obviously releases your muscles. Two, sweat is one of the like main 6 ways that Creator gave us to expel waste. So like tears, vomit, poop, pee, sweat, like those are all ways in which like we as Anishinaabe people were given to be able to deal with waste products and keep ourselves well. Obviously, there's also the spiritual impact of feeling connected to people, to land, to spirit, to creation. So going to a sweat lodge, That will help move you out of freeze. Reconnect with a friend, focus on what they're saying, connect by smudging, cleansing yourself, right? And that's rest too. When you smudge, that's your body and mind connecting, which remember, rest is anything that connects to your body and mind and gives you a sense of safety or comfort. So those are the ways in which you can potentially move out of freeze. Because we need to meet ourselves with warmth and with attunement. And so if for example, this might be something that happens. I know at least there's a lot of dysfunction in a lot of different families, where the holidays is actually a time where a lot of people in your family might start drinking. Not that drinking inherently is dysfunctional, but when people are drunk all the time and you know that you're going home to family members that are angry, so for example, if this happens to you in the holidays, here is an example of what you could try. So your family members start to argue with your siblings, tell them you're always drinking, you're not good, you're no good, the argument escalates, and then they're shouting, the sibling storms out, right? So inappropriate response to your nervous system, your emotions, all of the things, they're going to interpret that situation. They'll be like, probably, for me at least, my body would be like, freeze. I don't know what's happening. I need a second to figure it out. Stop moving, don't talk. And that's why people get like shocked, when something like shocking happens and you just kind of sit there. That's like dissociation. That's the freeze response, which in the short term is very appropriate because your brain literally needs to comprehend what's happening. But maybe that happens, your family is argued, people are drinking, and now you're not engaged with your family. You're just scrolling mindlessly on your phone. You go to sleep, and the next day you don't feel like waking up. You feel numb and dissociated, right? So you thank your body. I'm glad that your response to your family members arguing while they were drinking was to freeze. That's a really good thing, actually. That's a really appropriate short-term solution for something, because what if you had gotten up and tried to intervene and then you got hit or things became aggressive, right? So I always try and be gracious about the ways in which my body initially responds because it's doing it with the best intent. How can I keep Alexa the safest in this situation? Well, she needs to get angry. Well, she needs to freeze. My body is always looking out for me. That's why you should really be thankful for your body, because it's pretty much the only person that's always looking out for you. Like no matter what, literally, like always, 24/7, it's always looking out for you. So thank your body. But freeze, but now you're stuck in this freeze because you dealt with this really scary encounter or this upsetting encounter. And so now you're really disengaged, right? So what could you do in that moment to then help yourself? Well, if you were at that relative's house, you could go put on some hot water, boil it for tea, add sugar, notice the taste of the sugar, right? Because you're connecting to one of your senses. You could rub your arm for some movement and heat, survive the moment to do, and that's also a very appropriate response that people often use to survive really difficult moments, is they just try to survive the moment. Those are like people that are always living in survival. And it's really hard to get out of living out of survival, but essentially you just distract yourself enough until you're able to get back to your window of tolerance, which I'm going to talk about next. But it's like a form of so surviving the moment sometimes means distracting yourself, such as by scrolling on your phone. So again, that was an appropriate response to the freeze, right? It's just like, okay, not sure what's going on. I'm going to do this and be distracted until I can get home, or until I can be in the safe place and like really think about what just happened. And then when you're in your window of tolerance, that's when you try to change things. Don't go and try and change your emotion when you're up high here angry or down here can't even move sad. Like that's just not possible. You have to wait until you get back into your window of tolerance, which could be an hour later, it could be a day later, and then you can talk to the people involved, right? But don't respond right from emotion. Your body might tell you this is really urgent, you should do this, but just remember, like, thank your body for the reaction that it had, for keeping you safe in that moment. Help survive the moment, whether that's distraction and or doing things to bring you out of freeze. I'm going to warm myself up. I'm going to boil a hot cup of tea. I'm going to taste the sweetness of something, right? Mm-hmm. And then make changes when you're back to your window of tolerance.
I really love what you're just saying there about like being kind to yourself and helping yourself get out of that into that window of tolerance. And I just wondered, we just have a friend out there who just sort of left a comment, and I just wondered if we could just take a moment to connect with them. And
Okay.
so this is what they have shared with us.
So I'll read it. So every year around Christmas time, I feel depressed. I feel like I just want Christmas to be over with and just cry in the corner. I think that's absolutely how a lot of people are feeling. Like that's 100%. The holidays again are really not joyful for everyone. And that's a completely reasonable thing to do. Because and in that situation, so sending a lot of like love and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. That's a really difficult thing because people don't like sharing when they're not really feeling the holidays, because then they feel like a Grinch. They're like, oh, I'm the one person who doesn't like the holidays, but probably some really crappy things went down for you previously around Christmas time, and that's why it feels that way. And that's okay, because that's your brain trying to protect you. It's like something happened around Christmas, remember, so in the interim, I'm going to protect, I think I'm going to be protecting you by helping to move our nervous system into sadness so that we can survive this moment. And I think, and same with just like crying in the corner. Crying, one, is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing because you're releasing. Again, that's one of the 6 ways that Creator gave us to be able to release things that are hard. And so feeling depressed, I would just, I'm not sure like what your family situation is or what's going on, but even if you don't feel like there's people that are safe around you to, and if you are going to cry, don't do it in the corner. Go to a tree, go outside, put your hand on the ground, like hold a tree, hold like the ground, like just connect to Mother, because the issue is that when we process emotions, or we're not processing emotions, or we're doing it by ourselves, it can feel really hard, but we have all of creation around us. So if those things are still serving you, if it serves you to still feel really sad over Christmas, if it serves you and it helps you survive the moment, then continue to do it and thank your body for helping you survive probably what was a really difficult situation. If it's not serving you and you don't want to be depressed around Christmas, or you want to break that pattern where your brain is like, hey, this time's coming up, make sure you're sad, and you're like, no, I don't want that, then that's when we would go to some of the techniques that we've talked about. So either changing the thought, the feeling, or the behavior, right? So if you're feeling really sad and you're really cold, warm yourself up. Okay, I'm going to put on a pot of tea. And yeah, is that going to fix all your problems? Probably not. But it's going to start to reestablish a new pattern to your brain. Make new memories. Memory replacement is a really important thing to do that for people with trauma. It's really underutilized. There's often times where places where I've had the most awful experiences in my life, or terrible, terrible places, I go to those places around Christmas time and I put tobacco down where those places are, and I just leave it out there. So recreate emotions or memories that make this a really beautiful time, right? Like go out and look at the Christmas lights. Listen to people singing on the street, or whatever you have access to. Really try, if you can, and this feels attainable, to try and go out there and have connection in some sort of way, because that's one that you can reprocess traumatic events by creating a memory over it and or reprocessing. How you can do that at home, I think what it's called in like counseling is EMDR. It's like desensitization something. It's essentially the thing that people use to process eye movement, desensitize. Doesn't matter. But so you don't have to talk about things that are hard at Christmas if that doesn't feel good to a therapist, but you can, and we'll talk about this is actually called like the butterfly hug. If you have your palms like this and you like link them, like how there's just like a butterfly, right? This is like a butterfly, your thumbs are touching, and you have your hands like this, not towards your arms, but like this, and they're right below your collarbone, like this, right? And you think about the thing of like why Christmas feels hard, and you tap and you keep thinking, what this is doing is you're forcing your body to use the left side of your brain, the right side of your brain, left side, right side, left side, right side. So this is how people process traumatic memories, traumatic incidents, because you're just trying to rework that memory so that it goes back into storage, right? Because oftentimes parts of a traumatic incident are either like super blown up, like they're like, wow, high definition, you can see it really clearly, and some parts are just faded and you're like, I don't remember what's going on. And you don't actually need to recall every single detail of a traumatic event, but when you think about hard things and you want to move through them, literally this bilateral touch stimulation by going like this and thinking about hard things, it helps the left and right side of your brain connect, so that we can put those memories where they belong. Maybe there's something that belong in the past. Maybe they don't have use for the future. Or maybe that's not serving you, feeling sad over Christmas. Or maybe it is. If it is, don't change it. You know, like I think being sad and depressed is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's a very normal thing around this time. But if it's not serving you, think about the things that make Christmas hard. Cry, put your tobacco out, talk to the land, literally hug a tree, hold a tree, grab onto snow, do anything like that. And when you think, because people will often, what they'll do is they'll think about traumatic things and then they'll get stuck in them because they're like, well, now I remember this thing and this thing and this thing. And so that's why it's important to have this like technique going so that you're still processing, right? Because we want to be able to move through things, because when something has happened, it's already happened. There's actually, which is again, when people tell me that, I'm like, don't tell me what I, you know, like when something has happened, it's happened. And I think my psychiatrist, when she asked me, she's like, Alexa, what purpose does it serve you still being sad about this? I said, well, it's not resolved. Like, I don't feel it's resolved. Like, I feel like it is. I don't want to actually give up being sad about what happened to me in my childhood, because I am sad and it is sad. And she said, okay, do you feel like that still serves you? And I'm like, well, no, you know, it makes me really upset. It makes me suicidal, you know, all of these things. And so that's another hard thing to ask yourself too, is like, is this still serving you? If it keeps you protected, keep doing it. If it doesn't and you need to move through it, do those things, try those things. Because I'm really sending a lot of love and care to you, because this is really a difficult time. I'm so glad you're here for this talk as well, and just like listening in and hopefully coming up with some ideas that we'll talk about for how we can make this better. Because when things have happened in the past, we get to choose how much those impact us today, which I highly disagreed with when I first heard this concept, because I was like, that's not true. And then I talked more with psychiatry, and they were like, you get to decide how much this bothers you today, right at this very moment, right now. You could have the thought, Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year and I absolutely love it. Like, you could have that, literally, you could change how you think about that right now. You could say that, think that, feel that, make yourself kind of like cheat code yourself and make yourself feel happy. Like, Christmas is like the greatest time of year, right? Especially if it's like from old stuff that nothing can be done about. If there is, like, there's justice that can happen. There's, you know, I don't really without knowing the complete context, but if there's things that have happened before and there's nothing you can do about it, that's when you utilize the like, okay, well, why do you have to keep suffering from it then? At that point, you don't need to, and you can choose not to. And in this very moment right now, you can say, the world is the best thing in the world. I absolutely love Christmas. And so your brain is going to be like, so Alexa, you had this thought. This is a very different thought. But okay, you're having this. And so then I'm like, yep, nervous system, Christmas is the best time of year. And then I start smiling like a crazy person. Sorry, not a crazy person. Like a really deranged person, like the Joker, you know, where he has this like big smile. And I'm like, I am so happy. And people are like, well, then that's fake. It's like your brain needs to create patterns in order to break habits. So sometimes it does involve being like, I'm not actually happy, but your nervous system doesn't know that. It's like, oh, I sense that Alexa's facial nerves are lifting. I sense that her eyes are getting bigger. I sense her heart is growing bigger. This must mean happiness. maybe that means we associate happiness with Christmas time, right? Or you listen to a song you really like, you look at the color yellow, and then you think this thought, Christmas is not depressing, it's the most wonderful time of the year, I absolutely love it, right? And then you have like, I got a pocket full of sunshine, right? You have something that's like totally hacking into the fact that you're happy. You're not happy about Christmas, because that's not going to change immediately, but you are now making a different association. And so then your brain, remember, it's going to try and make patterns. So when we think of this happy song, maybe that's what we associate with Christmas. So there are ways to do that, and I hope that helps. Were there any other questions?
No, I don't think so. That was like the one. And thank you so much to that person for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for being like really open and honest and vulnerable and saying what everyone thinks, which is that the holidays are going to be really depressing and hard. That's how I think about the holidays. So, and it is okay to cry. Please do so. And also, if it's not serving you in this very moment, you can change it. You can. So what are some other ways? Talking about your window, how can trauma affect your window of tolerance? So your window of tolerance, so remember how I was talking about there's hypoarousal, that's like angry, out of control, overwhelmed, right? There's hypo, which is scared, zone out, numb, frozen. In between those two peaks, one peak and one low, is your window of tolerance. And you know how big your window of tolerance is because it's like how much can you handle before you get stressed out. That's your window of tolerance. That's essentially the layman's way of describing your window of tolerance. So when you're in your window of tolerance, you feel like you can deal with whatever's happening in your life. You might feel stress or pressure, so it's not like fine and dandy, nothing stressful is happening. You still know that there's stress and pressure, but it doesn't bother you so much that you are so angry that you can't do anything, or you're so frozen that you can't do anything, right? You're in this place where like you could handle life stressors in that day, in that moment. And people's window of tolerance changes like per day, per hour, per minute, right? Depending on what the circumstance is. And so all this to say is that stress and trauma shrink that yellow box, right? Because you can have a really big window of tolerance. You're like, I can tolerate a lot of crap before I become super mad or super frozen. And the thing is, I don't really think it's necessarily a good idea to test your window of tolerance. How much can I take before it's too much? I'm like, or we can just go back to my first principle, which is rest is resistance, and like, we don't need to test the limits of our window of tolerance. And when we do that, we harm ourselves. But when we're in this window, this means that still stress, still issues, but you feel like you can deal with it. And that's the time when you would try and address. So like that comment about, I feel really distressed and awful about Christmas. I want to cry in the corner. If you're actively crying in the corner, you're not in your window of tolerance, right? So don't try and make these big, like, don't listen to this talk about trying to change something when you're not even in the state of like, you're at that moment when you're crying, your priority is to survive the moment. Feel the emotion, move through the emotion, and then once you're back to your window of tolerance, which is, okay, maybe this is a new day, maybe I'll try and see things differently. But when you're high emotion angry, that's why I'm like, when you're arguing with your partner, don't try and make these like big changes of like, well, you're gonna do the dishes now and I'm gonna do that. Like it's just not possible. Like your window of tolerance is where you need to work within if you want changes that you make for your coping mechanisms to be successful. If you try and do things when you're hyper-aroused, it's not going to work and it's going to cause more problems for you. So your fight response. So that's again, right, that's a part of the sympathetic nervous system. Fight is the rage, the anger, the bullying, the intimidation. And so the somatic experience of these survival roles associated with flight activation is often feeling a sense of urgency that something needs to happen or change now, right? It's the impulse to be tense, to brace yourselves. It's the impulse to lash out or to blame people for your issues or what's going on, because it's a source of protection for ourselves, right? Like that's our body's way of protecting itself. But the stress hormones, they flush through the system, your heart rate speeds. And something to consider is when you're always in a state of your heart rate speeding up and slowing down, that actually puts a lot of stress on your cardiac muscle, which is literally the heart muscle. because you do want to use it, right? Like you do want your heart pumping, but when it's boom, 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 120 because you're stressed all of the time, your heart can't sustain that. And that's why people get heart attacks, is because you're physiologically, you cannot stay in a high heartbeat for extended periods of time. That's why there's a lot of morbidity with high blood pressure, hypertension, right? That's where your blood pressure is always elevated. That means you're the same system, but now it's high pressure within a small system, right? So you really need to think about stress and it affecting people's blood pressure. And stress is a huge part of people's blood pressure. So if we're practicing the things that we're talking about, then we can actually treat like really chronic diseases such as high blood pressure. Like that is actually a treatment for hypertension. But just to know that the big ups and downs of like being quick to rage, quick to impulse, that's not good for your heart, because your heart can't sustain really, really heavy beating for long periods of time because you're in overdrive of fight or flight. It's just not good. And so when you have a fight response, and it's, you know, a state of defensiveness, of hypervigilance, right? You're really sensitive to what someone has to say. You're like, why did you say that? Or like, I heard you sniffle, or, you know, like you're so heightened. And that makes sense because when you're angry or you're, upset, we want our body to be able to do that. It's just that we don't want to respond to every situation like that, because not every situation requires rage or anger. And so there's something called the stop skill. This is like a DBT CBT practice, and literally the STOP stands for something, and it literally means stop. So when you feel angry or rageful, you get an email, you're just like fuming, you can feel yourself shaking. Do not react impulsively. Take a step back from the situation and breathe. And why I say that isn't, I don't know, to be philosophical, where people are like, just take a step back and breathe. And it's like, no, one, you don't want to say something that you regret because you're not thinking, right? You're in the hyper, we need to wait till we're back in our window of tolerance before we address that. Thank the anger for the emotion that it did because it was trying to protect you, but wait. And when you take a breath, that's really, you need a few breaths for your frontal lobe to kick in. Your frontal lobe is the thing that's like, we probably shouldn't swear at our boss because then we're going to get fired. Or we're not going to do that thing because that's not a good idea. And so when you take a breath, one, right, you're the vagus nerve that we've talked about, you're innervating your diaphragm because breath comes from your vagus nerve. Like that is intimately connected. That's why when you do the belly breath, that's your diaphragm. You're pushing up against your diaphragm. So when you do that, one, your vagus nerve is like, oh, cool. So we're going to try and be chill right now, right? That's what I'm getting if we're taking this breath. And the other thing is that you need time for your frontal lobe to kick in. So just essentially try and delay doing anything impulsive by any means necessary, especially when you're really, really angry and acting. Sometimes being angry and acting out immediately is in your best, like that's the best course of action actually. But for the times it's not, really take a step back. Have your frontal lobe kick in by taking a breath, which then touches your vagus nerve, which helps you breathe. And observe your internal bodily sensations, thoughts, and feelings. Connect with your five senses in the presence. What are others saying or doing, right? So the O is observe. So how do I know I'm angry? Well, I feel my jaw is clenched. Okay, I'm gonna undo my jaw here. How else do I know? Well, my brow is furrowed. Okay, I'm gonna flatten this out, right? There's the things, especially when anger is not the appropriate response to something. And then P, which is proceed mindfully by acting with awareness. Think about your long-term goals, right? Anger is not thinking about your long-term goals. It's thinking about your short-term, what it perceives as justice, right? So it's not thinking, what could this mean for me in the future? It's thinking we need to act now, which again, helpful for certain situations, not helpful for others. So which actions will make the situations better or worse? So this is an example. So maybe it's Christmas Day, you're opening Christmas presents, and one of your kids, says, this gift is stupid. I don't want this. And you spent what little extra funds you had to acquire this gift, right? So you might have a fight response. You hear your kid say that, and you scowl and you start, right, your facial expression changes, and so then your nervous system's like, oh, we're angry, she's scowling and she's furrowing her brow, and now she's yelling, so that must mean we're really angry. So maybe you start shouting, you're so ungrateful, you think to yourself, this kid is so stupid, they're so spoiled, like so ungrateful, right? That's like something, that's a realistic thing that you may come across on your Christmas day. And so the first thing we need to ask, does anger fit the facts? Does screaming and shouting match the degree of the situation? So in this case, I would argue probably not, right? What this kid is responding to is like, yeah, we want to teach them about being grateful and being kind. And the way to do that isn't by yelling and telling them they're ungrateful and that they're spoiled, right? That's not going to change. And then now they're going to develop a pattern of like, every time my mom yells, it's because, they're going to start to, their brains are picking up how you're handling things, and that's how they're going to handle things. So if you want to create kids that grow up to be adult men or adult women who yell every single time they have even a little bit of taste of anger, then you're like, that's really not good for our generations then, and that's not good for our communities. But this is not the time where I'm going to try and educate my child about I don't know, being grateful, and like, you should be grateful for what you get, you try and does the anger of like calling your kid stupid or thinking your kid is stupid or thinking they're supposed, like, is that, I don't want to say appropriate, because maybe that is what you think, I don't know, but does that fit the facts of the situation? The fact of the situation is that your kid commented they did not like a present. Right? So based off of that, what is the appropriate response? And so anger fits the facts when an important goal is blocked. You're being blocked from a goal that's super important to you. Anger is an appropriate emotion when you or someone you care about is getting attacked or hurt. Anger is appropriate when you or someone you care about is threatened. So in any of those instances, did anger fit the facts? Was our kid saying that they didn't like their present an important goal for us being blocked, someone we care about being attacked or hurt, or someone you care about being threatened? And the answer is no. So if the facts don't fit the emotion, then you change the emotion, right? So you'd say, okay, you either radically accept your anger, you accept the fact that you were angry, it's okay that you were angry, you're not going to proceed by shouting and screaming. You're going to do the opposite action, you're actually going to give that kid a hug. You know what, I think we'll talk about this later. And you do the opposite action of rage and anger, which is instead of to fight, it's to actually love, right? You do the opposite, and then your body's like, oh, I guess we're not angry anymore because now we have this deep pressure stimulation of the bear hugging our child. So I don't really know what's happening here, but clearly we're not angry because this isn't anger, right? So you're cueing your body to change how it feels. Maybe you gently avoid the person you're angry with until you can, figure out why was that so upsetting that was said to you? Like, that's the root of the issue, right? Or do something a little bit nice rather than mean or insulting. So like calling someone stupid. Again, I'm not shaming. Also, to keep in mind, I'm not I did to some degree parent my own siblings, but I myself do not have children. So I'm not saying any of this to like try and change how or in which you parent. But it is a really helpful practice for yourself as a parent to have less suffering, and most parents are really scared about messing up their kids. That's like their number one concern. They're like, I'm going to mess up my kids just like my parents messed me up. And there's all of this like back talk and how we do things how we do things differently for our kids is we act differently. So respond in the way in which you hope your kids respond when they're older. And anger in this moment, in this little gray box, doesn't really fit the facts. Like, our important goal isn't being blocked. No one's being attacked or hurt. No one's being threatened. If that is happening, then anger is very appropriate. Act on that anger, right? Like you of course, if that were to be the case. And so if it is, say anger was the right, so it fits the facts. I don't want to say right or wrong because emotions are what they are. They're not right or wrong. But if anger fits the facts, yes, then experience the emotion. Radically accept your anger. Communicate your anger effectively. Mindfully observe your anger without reacting to it. Express Anger through activities, whether that's drawing, writing, playing sports. So it's not to say like, oh, when you're angered, attack someone. But that's an okay emotion to have when you have anger, and it's because of one of these 3 reasons. If it's not that, then anger is not an appropriate emotion. We need to radically accept that we felt angry. That doesn't make us a bad person. That makes us human. And now we're moving on to the thing that's going to help me move out of this emotion, because it's not helping. Okay, so what about flight? This is supposed to say the thing that's supposed to be circled is flight, not freeze. So flight, when we're feeling super panicked, we're worried, we're ruminating, we can't stop thinking about this one thing that we did or this one thing that we said. Is that person mad at me? Is this going to get me in trouble? What's going on, right? And perfectionism. Also, keep a note. Perfectionism is a form of white supremacy. People don't really realize that, and I don't mean white in the sense of a white person. White supremacy is a concept where our society is ruled by the majority of which the population holds power. And so this perfectionism and aiming for perfectionism, that's 1, not realistic, and 2, that's like you're not going to be able to resist, or you're not going to be able to take care of yourself or your families if you're worrying about perfect because you want to grind, because you feel like you need to be perfect in order to do things right. That's a myth. You don't actually need to be able to do that. That's perfectionism is probably the ultimate enemy for really everyone, because it's just not attainable. And the world and society knows that it's not attainable, but it's going to keep pushing you to think that it is. And so then you're going to work even harder. You're going to put in more hours, right? And we don't want to fall for that. Rest is resistance. Rest is reparations. We're not doing that. So don't aim for perfectionism. But anyways, flight, panic, worry, rumination. So what we need to ground ourselves, right? Panic and worry is like up here, and we just need to get grounded. How do we do that? Deep belly breathing to activate our vagus nerve. Put hand on our chest, 1 on our stomach. Breathe from the stomach. There's actually a real thing when people are anxious and they start hyperventilating. They go like, because they're really, really anxious. You're making it worse. You're putting yourself into respiratory alkalosis. That's essentially where you're exhaling more carbon dioxide, which is acid, than normal. You're breathing out too much. You're losing too much carbon dioxide. So there's not enough oxygen. So as a result, there's not enough oxygen in your blood. Your pH level drops. It actually increases because you're becoming more basic on the pH level. The pH level of oxygen, if the pH level is high, then the level of oxygen isn't actually being delivered to release to your organs, which is why people feel dizzy or they go unconscious, right? When they're like really panicking, they feel like they're going to pass out. That's why, is because their breathing is probably shallow breaths and they're doing too many out breaths. They're losing too much carbon dioxide, which is acid. They're making their body and their blood more basic, and then oxygen isn't being delivered. If oxygen is not being delivered to my brain, then I can't breathe, right? That's when you start to feel dizzy, and then people go unconscious. So something to consider. Breath is just so crucial and important. Monitor how you breathe. Like, what is your normal state of breath? And really, especially when you're in that flight, like that's pretty well your like number 1 main tool to helping yourself become grounded again or be connected again. Put your feet flat on the ground, like touch the things, go outside. Like a lot of land-based activities are kind of treatment for all of these things, but especially that. And just remember, like, it's not in your head either if you're like panicked and you feel like you're gonna die. That makes sense because you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain. So that's why it feels like you're gonna die. So how can you avoid that? Breathe from your stomach, not through your chest. Another way, when you have really intense emotional distress, is these are called the tip skills, and these are the things that help you calm down. And this is a DBT skill because there are quick ways to change your heart rate, again, because your body will perceive, our heart rate is different. We must not be this emotion anymore. One is temperature. So people will literally hold their breath and put their head in a bowl of ice cold water or an ice pack on your face and hold it for 10 to 30 seconds. So, I mean, is that super practical when you're at work? Probably not. But there have been times where I've been walking out and about, absolutely panicked, for I don't even know what reason, and I'll literally just go to a store and I'll be like, can you put some ice in this cup? And I just grab that ice and I just put it on my face. And you might feel like you look a little bit bizarre, but it works because there's this receptor here. It's called it, and it's all mammals have it. It's the dive reflex. It's when you put something cold here, that alerts to your body that you need to reroute all of the blood flow to your center because you're entering somewhere cold, right? So when you're cold, your hands and your feet get cold because your body's like, we don't care about these limbs and these fingers. Like, we care about keeping your heart sustained. So it takes all of the blood and it puts it here. And when that happens, your heart rate decreases. You decrease by putting really cold temperature. It's like, it's a shock, right? And then your body's like, we're going deep underwater into coldness. And you're like, no, you're not. You're not diving into Lake Superior. Please don't do that in the winter unless that's something you know how to do. But that's what your body thinks, right? And that's the thing. I mean, we can like hack so many things. We can convince our body that we're diving into cold water and that we should really focus all of our body heat and everything to our core and then decrease our heart rate. And then our body goes, oh, we must not be panicked anymore. That doesn't fit the facts. Where if our heart rate is low, we're not anxious, right? So that's a really quick way to physiologically change your heart rate and therefore what's happening with your nervous system. Intense exercise. And I mean like intense, like you sprint down the road for like however many seconds, or you like do jumping jacks until you can't breathe, right? Doing intense exercise, run fast, jump, or lift weights like really fast, it's just burning cortisol. That's the way in which you're helping that, is you're literally burning cortisol because your tissues are moving more and therefore you're metabolizing cortisol quicker. So that's why, you know, when people work out, sometimes they do something really intense and they're like, oh, I feel like so much better. And it's because before they were stressed and the cortisol is being broken down. Paced breathing, slow down your breath, breathe deeply into your belly, breathe in for 5, out for 7. There's lots of different things on the internet that tell you like breathe for this many sections, do the box breathing. Whatever breathing technique works for you is totally fine as long as it's coming from your belly and your diaphragm. It doesn't really matter. Like all of them are equally as good. And then paired muscle relaxation. And so a way to do this is on your phone with like a YouTube app or like the Calm app, which there's certain parts of that are free. Paired muscle relaxation is where you breathe in and you tense your body muscles and you notice that tension. And while you breathe out, you say the word relax and you let go of the tension. So if we were to even do it now and you were to close your eyes and you were to squeeze your toe, so you're like tense, tension, tension, tension. You're squeezing your toe as hard as you can. And then you say relax. And you let your toes relax and you take a really big deep breath. Right? And then you do that with every single body part. 1, you'll get really tired. 2, you'll be extremely relaxed. But that's the way to do it, is like you intentionally tense something up and then you breathe it out. So those are physiologic ways to change your, like what's happening in your body, which changes your nervous system response and therefore your emotion. We've gone over the bilateral stimulation, which is the butterfly. So keeping your hands like kind of up this way rather than this way. And doing the tapping while you're thinking about hard things, right? The left part of our brain controls emotions, creativity. The right is brain usually like sort of dominates, the right brain, emotions, creativity, left brain, logic, patterns, control. And so when you're doing things midline or mid-center of your body, this is the center of your nervous system. This is the center. So when you do this, you're literally, your extremities are crossing the center of the line of your body, which is how it activates the other side. So you're activating both hemispheres simultaneously. So then your brain can like deploy different coping mechanisms. So think about that. Mm-hmm. And so what we'll end on is really we can't heal what our nervous system can't regulate. And so I think about the beaver and the 7th, which is usually the 7th sacred teaching, which reminds us to recognize differences in a kind and respectful way and continuously observe life of all things to allow ourselves to learn. So the value of wisdom is about intent to grow, right? So there might be things that I said that you absolutely hated, you didn't like that I said that, it doesn't feel great, but it's just the openness to learn and to hear new things. And that's really what the beaver is telling us. Is to, in order to develop wisdom, we need knowledge. In order to develop knowledge, we need to be open. So I invite you to recognize how your nervous system responds to things during the holiday season. Notice and be aware of your body. Notice, aware, and be aware of your breath. And do any of the actions that we talked about to help keep yourself regulated, so that we can get through this holiday. Okay, so miigwech everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll pass it over to Carly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. You just shared so many different ways for us to just like take control of our personal patterns, the emotional and the thoughts, the physiological aspect. Just thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing. We really appreciate all that you shared today. I'm going to pass the mic over to Candida in just a moment, but I just wanted to say to everyone, all our friends and family out there who joined us today, if there was something that was said today that you really connected with, I just want you to know that if you'd like to return to the presentation, you are able to view it on YouTube. That will be posted for quite a while. Are there any other? Facebook Live as well. So if there was something that really you connected with that you want to share with your friends, please let them know and share today's presentation with them. We really want to also specifically thank those who shared some of their stories and their experiences with us today. We love you, and we are really grateful that you were able to come and join us today. I also just want to mention our survey really quickly. I'm sure that Bailey has been posting the link to that survey, and as Candida said earlier, it will be up there for a few days. And so when we receive all of those surveys, I actually am the one, I'm going to take all of those comments, all of those requests, and I pass it over to Alexa as a document, and she creates all the presentations based on the information that we get from you. So miigwech to everyone for joining us today. One last thing about the surveys is that we have a really beautiful self-care basket that once the survey closes, we're going to draw a name and we will contact you. So please definitely provide us with your email or a way to get a hold of you on your survey, and we will contact you and let you know that your name was drawn. So yes, thank you again, Dr. Alexa. Thank you, Candida. We'll pass it over to you.
To close.
Hi. Once again, thanks again to Dr. Alexa for sharing all the rich knowledge and stories with us. And thank you for answering everyone's questions. We really appreciate the time you took to review the questions and go over all the importance of the holiday, importance of us to keep ourselves healthy and rested. Like I didn't even know that was possible, but now I do. And thank you as well to those of us who have joined us today and who listened to this talk afterwards. We hope you enjoyed the talk and received some valuable information. Have a great rest of your day and happy holidays to everyone.
Miigwech.